Morning, Cristo here on TalkTV with, of course, Dr. Renee, who is here as well, the NHS GP and broadcaster, I should say.
Thank you so much.
I should give you your full title. And Andrew Eborn is here, barrister and broadcaster. Morning to you.
Good morning.
So, can I do a couple of tweets and texts on what we've been talking about? And I'll get your reaction to those. Donna says, Cristo is talking absolute... a word I can't use at this time of the morning.
Good start.
We are overrun. This is on the subject of migrants and Gary Lineker. We can't set up safe routes until we've gotten through the backlog and got some order back, says Donna Louise. Well, firstly, it's the government that have said that people need to take the safe route. So I'm just saying I don't know what that safe route is. But also, I do feel a moral obligation still to help the people who genuinely need it. And I think actually by doing that, we have more justification to say, well, look, we're not heartless. We're not just wanting to turn away everyone. We're wanting to turn away the people who we don't believe are genuine. And so, personally, I think you're more likely to get what you actually want by setting up those safe routes myself. But maybe you think that we shouldn't even have those. I mean, is there an argument to say, look, actually, we need to have no routes for a while?
Well, I do think that we are straining at the seams, I really do.
I agree.
And actually, if you look at the estimates, the estimates are that there are 100 million refugees around the world who will move. And for a small island who has rubbish infrastructure, can't actually deal with its NHS as it currently stands, or its education or its housing, I do think it's a problem, Cristo, and I think it's a problem culturally as well.
Also, let's not forget as well, in us saying, look, it's quite a fair comment to say that the government are good to be doing something about this. They are actually solving a problem that has been created by the backlog that they've not been dealing
by
with.
themselves.
And so let's not forget that as well. And actually the reason that people are so angry is because of the money being spent on housing and putting into hotels people who are migrants whom we don't know whether are genuine or not. And that's as a result of the backlog. Yeah. And Germany has more migrants than us, yet their backlog is, I think, under half the time. And so it is absolutely due to...
But they also accept far fewer than we do as a percentage. So our Home Office almost say yes the moment that they, actually pick up their one form a week.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think that's because they're just, like, trying to get through as many as possible because...
Do you?
Or why? What do you think?
I think it's because the civil service is the most left-leaning organisation that we now have.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's quite a claim as well.
That is quite a claim.
I mean, and it is, but the problem is this. You're right. 4% with the only people who are processed, according to the statistics. It's outrageous. We don't... 4%. So there's a massive, massive backlog. We don't have the infrastructure. We don't have the setup to do this. So we need to address it. And the problem, what's happened, as you rightly point out, it's become a political hot potato. You mentioned about immigration. You're described with all sorts of the ist terms. And that's the sort of issue. And when we come on to good old Gary... That's what he was trying to say about looking at the wording that we use with this sort of policy. It needs to be addressed, but it needs to be addressed in a humane and practical way. But let's get the facts right. Let's have more light and less heat, I always say.
I agree, and also I will say it again, and I know that you agree with this, Renee, I don't believe if you're in a more deprived area and you can't get your child into a school, or you can't, you don't have decent public transport, or you can't get a GP's appointment, and yet there is a very high migrant population there, naturally you're going to say, well, look, what's going on here? And that doesn't make you racist. That makes you worried about your family, and I think that that's okay.
Yeah, and I think you're right. And when we unpack these sort of... What I love about this show is you do exactly that. You get to the facts, you get behind the rhetoric, you get behind the sort of sensational headlines. And actually, that's
isms, as you said.
It's all an ism, isn't it? That's what Gary was saying, because in 1930s, well, you will come on to this, in 1930s, it wasn't just Germany. There were problems in America, there were problems over here. The language, they were concerned about immigration. They were concerned about people coming over here. We can't afford to look after people already here, let alone any extra ones.
But also the other reason why it's so utterly moronic is that you wouldn't have been able to in 1930s Germany send any kind of critical tweet about, well, not tweet anyway. You wouldn't be able to anyway.
Ahead of your time.
Anything, say anything so outwardly criticising the government at the time, because it wasn't allowed. So it's contradictory in that way.
And haven't you just hit the nail on the head, though? Is it not that now, in 2023, we have so many outlets to make our voices heard that we never had access to before? So Gary Lineker with his 8 million followers...
8.8.
8.8 million followers that, let's make no mistake, he's got because he's a presenter on Match of the Day, is able to make his views known, and they go viral because if far more than 8.8 million people have now seen it looking at today's papers.
But actually, like I say, I don't know him personally. People I know who know him say he's a really nice guy.
He is a really nice guy.
But have you met him?
A lovely guy, absolutely, and he's offered me the job tonight to fill in for him. I'm doing it. I'm doing it with my good friend Pat Sharp. So that'll be a brilliant show. Do join us. It's got to be a thrill.
But I'm sure he's a nice guy. He's every right to say what he wants to. But you cannot do it if you are paid that much money by the BBC. And as I say, for 10% of that money, I'd gag myself.
I would do it for 99% of it. But the reality is this, Cristo: the money he's paid is so irrelevant. And I think it's totally right. Why does it matter how much he's paid?
Because it's our money.
No, but you work out. The reason they have to do it, and if he went to one of the commercial channels, he would be paid far more. They only pay it because that's the going rate if you want to have a star of his stature.
I disagree materially with you on this one.
Oh, look at you! We never disagree. We even coordinated with colours. Chanel, come on.
Look, if he went to Sky, that's fine because they don't have an impartiality rule and he could say what he wanted.
And I can choose whether I take Sky.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. The BBC, we have no choice. I don't watch the BBC. I don't even have a TV, but I have to pay the licence fee.
So let's unpack this in the proper way then, because impartiality, you're right, there are very clear rules. Ofcom govern everybody. You've got to work on that sort of basis. Well, almost everybody. You've got to work on that sort of basis. If you're a news journalist, you have to be totally impartial. But you look at something, Jeremy Clarkson worked for Top Gear when he was a Sun columnist. You had Andrew Neil was the host of a political show
and he got
when he was a column. Well, no, but that's for different reasons. And he was also not properly quoted when he was talking about Game of Thrones, was his little quote on that sort of basis for the other things. And he was cancelled because there was a fisticuff over a steak.
But Jeremy Clarkson has just been cancelled for what he said about Meghan.
Well, but again, and it's unfortunate because it's good to look at both of these. What Jeremy actually was trying to do in his wonderful way, he's not sorry for what he wrote. What he was sorry for is that there was a bit of outrage. And he wasn't sorry about that either. Because I always say, if you want to draw a crowd, start a fight. It's P.T. Barnum, this is what you do. And what better way? The stories at the moment are all about Gary Lineker, not about Rishi talking to Macron.
Yes,
and there's like a little column somewhere on that. So we need to look at that. So let's deal with Clarkson first of all. What he was saying in his column was, actually it's a quote from Game of Thrones. There's a scene where they threw all sorts of excrement and other bits and pieces, and that was the one. And he talked about Meghan Markle.
But he didn't reference the Game of Thrones.
He didn't reference it. And he said, well, that's what I meant. Would it have made a difference? Is he sorry? No, of course he's not sorry. And I think you work on the sort of basis that that's a column, that's how he writes and so on and so forth. Everybody took offence.
He doesn't work for the BBC.
He doesn't work for... But does it matter that you work for the BBC?
Yes.
Why does it matter that it works for the BBC?
Because, as René was saying, we are forced to pay for Gary Lineker's salary. Now, you're quite right. If Jerry Clarkson says something that I don't like, I can say I'm never watching Who Wants to Be a Millionaire again. I could say I hate ITV for employing him. I'm never going to watch ITV again. In my life, I won't be paying anything for it. It's my decision as a consumer whether I consume it. The BBC is held to a different standard because I don't have a choice about whether I get to pay for it or not. So therefore, that's why I have more of a say in what they can say or not.
So none of the presenters, just to be clear on this, you're saying that none of the presenters on the BBC are entitled to exercise their right of freedom of speech?
What I said at the start of the show, and I'll say it again, I think if you're a news presenter, you are held to a higher standard.
Absolutely.
I think if you're a non-news presenter, there is a bit more leeway. I do think the BBC
what can you
needs
say?
to get
Can you say
house.
I support the policy?
I don't think you can directly say you support or disagree with a government
So you're not
policy.
allowed to view?
No, not if you're a BBC presenter, no.
Nobody's allowed to view. That's an outrageous thing to say.
But we've seen that Andrew Marr has left because he wants to be able to have a view.
No, but as a general principle, let's look at it, because if you're looking at the contractual side, firstly, Gary, and I'm a lawyer who know those sort of things, look at the contractual side. Gary is a freelancer. It works through that sort of basis. The terms of his contract would be a question about whether he's breached those. And normally in these sort of contracts, you would have, if somebody's brought into disrepute or so on and so forth, and you could argue that. The whole question about freedom of speech is that and I think it's a really dangerous claim to say that anybody who works for the BBC cannot share an opinion.
Share a direct opinion in favour or against a government policy. I do think there's more leeway if you're not in news that you can have it could probably have a bit of an opinion on football, for instance, but not massively. We know he supports Leicester City, for instance.
Yes.
So on that, people can go, well, OK, he's not a news presenter. But if you are going to have a direct opinion on government policy, I think you're on very dodgy ground if you are paid by the BBC. Now, you have the right to not work for the BBC and you can have as many opinions as you like. It's actually not about what he said about a government policy. It's about the fact he said it when he's paid by us.
And that's the interesting thing, because I'm sure the great British public who tune in their millions to watch today's show would disagree with you. A large proportion, the same way as a lot of the BBC people and presenters are turning around and supporting Gary and saying, well, actually, we're not going to do the show as a result of it. If we're not allowed to have an opinion or to state an opinion, that's got to be wrong. There's got to be a balance between the phrasing of it, I think, is unfortunate. But again, as I said at the beginning, he didn't directly compare it to the Holocaust, because the Holocaust was actually not in the 30s, it was in the 40s. So let's get those facts right.
Not the Holocaust, but to Nazi Germany.
Oh, no, I get it. And it's I disagree totally, as the wonderful Voltaire would have said. Evelyn Beatrice Hall, wasn't it? I disapprove of what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. I think the reality is, but you're raising a much wider question, which I do think I strongly disagree with, is that BBC presenters should be allowed to have an opinion. I think if you're in news, you have to remain impartial, and the rules are already in place about that.
That's fine. I think, yes, you're right. Let's take away the licence fee.
Well, that's also debated. I hosted, I hosted for the Royal Television Society. Everybody talked about the BBC for 100 years. I hosted something with Greg Dyke and various other things, looking at the future of the BBC. And he turned around and said, look, what do we want? If you want an independent, good question, broadcaster who can hold everybody to account, then how's that going to be funded? Because it's not just from the commercial side.
They're not independent, because they have the Royal Charter that comes up. They have the licence fee as well, which is essentially controlled by the government. I've always said this, I would fund a basic BBC out of ring-fenced general taxation, very basic, news, radio, probably BBC One, and that's about it. And then I would have a basic website, but then I would have subscription tiers for everything beyond that. So iPlayer, I subscribe to, I pay for. If I want BBC Two, if I want BBC Three, if I want BBC Four, if I want the website that gives me recipes and GCSE stuff, I have to pay for all of that. Therefore, it removes the licence fee, it removes the criminalisation of licence fee. The BBC gets some ring-fence money for its basic services, and then I would probably, because I quite like the BBC, actually, I would probably buy it. I probably would buy the full subscription, but it's my choice to then.
And it is interesting, because I had this discussion with Tim Davey and a number of others, and what we looked at is that it is the best alternative. It's not perfect, the licence fee, but if you looked at subscription and how that might work in various other countries, the difficulty is what you lose as a result, because it's not part of it. You have to. The first question you have to ask is not, is the licence fee worthwhile? It is to be, why do we have the BBC? Well, they would say, and it's the question about impartiality, the ability to hold the government to account.
Why?
Whether they do hold the government to account is a different matter.
Hold the government.
Well, that's the thing.
Look at
Are
COVID,
they fulfilling their charter?
What's happened over the last 3 years? I think you make an interesting point about Clarkson and Lineker, and I think actually that's the crux here. And it comes back to your question, Cristo, at the beginning. Would people be, supporting Lineker if he'd have said the opposite? And we have a split in society here where people didn't support Clarkson, didn't support Andrew Bridgen, but they do support Lineker. And when I say people, again, I go back to that North London clique living in their gated communities, earning a lot of money, thinking, oh, it's fine, you're just a racist.
And a general issue as well here in the UK. Maybe it's as a result of, you're right, who has the loudest voices. Maybe it's as a result of having Tory government for the last 13 years. But if your views are centre-right, you are seen as less desirable in media circles. And just going back to the point, what we would lose from the BBC, if you had a basic BBC paid for through taxation. Firstly, no government is going to come in and say, we'll abolish that and get rid of the BBC, firstly. But secondly, it's that general taxation that could provide the programming that doesn't rate particularly well.
And that's the thing.
The songs of praise, the regional news, the stuff that actually is part of the BBC's remit that isn't very commercially viable.
Yes.
I've no problem with my general taxes paying for those programmes. What I've a problem with is being forced to pay for everything else.
So any of the presenters on those programmes aren't allowed to view those, is that what you're saying?
Absolutely, yeah,
Okay.
they're not allowed to.
So that would be the condition. But you then need to specify that in their contract, because it's not at the moment.
Absolutely, but they're paid
And I
very
think-
nicely. Like I said, I've said many
Yeah.
times, you pay me £1.3 million, I would strip off, put on a fluorescent unitard and whistle Dixie.
I will pay you
I'll tell
1.4 not to, okay? Which will be good.
Where should
But
we
thank
go?
you for that. Now, as they say, now we know your price, Cristo. We'll start a campaign. I'll tell you what, the Great British Public, we'll start it now, Renee.
I
What
would
do you
do
think?
anything they ask me to do for that amount of money. So it's
Really?
not beyond the... Yes.
Why?
Because-
Why would you sell out? I don't know if they're just selling it. It might be your secret
No, it's
fantasy.
not selling out because it would be my decision. Or I could say, right, actually, you know what? I'm going to go to a commercial broadcaster instead where I can do whatever I like. Or I'm going to make the decision to be on Match of the Day, which is a prestigious show.
Yeah.
But I'm going to realise that because I'm paid for from the public, I have responsibilities.
But actually, your point, though, to be fair, Cristo, is not that it's the 1.3 million. Your point is about the whole licence fee if I get it. So even the lowliest BBC presenters on Tuppence Halfpenny, and that's how much they get if they're lucky, they, and that's a vast majority, are way below the 150,000. If you're paid, if your point is not the 1.3 million, your point, if I understand it rightly, is that whoever and however much they're paid at the BBC, they cannot state their opinions. That's right.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's get that clear. Yes.
Look
Renee.
what we're doing here. Look what we've just done in this room in the last 10 minutes.
Yes.
We talked about Gary Lineker and not mentioned the £500 million that Sunak is giving to the French to stop the boats.
And also what's interesting is so much about is like a lot of these things on the BBC with the Jonathan Ross, you might remember, and phoning up poor old Andrew Sachs's granddaughter.
You have a level of
Nobody,
responsibility.
you had like a couple of people complained about it, but the media all rushed in to say, oh, this is outrageous, and it gave it a worldwide audience as a result.
Well, that's the media's job, because the media was saying, well, actually, is there not? Look, maybe it's unfair, but are you not to be held to a slightly higher standard if you are paid for out of licence fees money? Now, again, if Russell Brand and Jonathan Ross did that in a commercial station, well, the market would speak for itself. Either the uproar would make the commercial people say, like they did with Jeremy Clarkson, we'll fire them, or I could switch off and go, it's nothing to do with me, and then the market forces would dictate. But on the BBC, I have no choice that my money goes to pay for that content.
Yeah,
That's why they have a different standard.
We disagree, respectfully, which is what I love about this sort of stuff. But we should also talk, because we were talking about the media, about many other things. But first of all, can I just wish, because I'm obsequious and things like that, it is the 71st anniversary of the 21st birthday for Rupert Murdoch. He's 92 today.
Wow.
Happy birthday. No, but you haven't done that yet.
Happy birthday, Rupert. I've been a massive fan of yours.
He pays your check. It's got to be good. I'm talking about, I'm sure if you whistle Dixie, we'll sort that out.
My birthday message to you, Rupert, is pay me 1.3 million, I'll do anything you want.
And I say, Rupert, pay him 1.4, and he won't, which is going to be good. We'll make that make sense. Fantastic.
That's
Happy birthday.
And what I will say is, my God, I sometimes I'm just like in my early 40s, can't be bothered to get out of bed.
My early 30s, I thank you.
He's 90.
He's 92. Absolutely amazing.
It's a secret to a long life, though, isn't it?
A picture of long life.
Just working hard.
And what I love, the newspapers today, which we might look at one stage, what I love about it is they're all talking about living a long life and being less stressed. Rupert's fantastic. 92 years old, 71st birthday of his 71st anniversary, and glorious. And he should tell us the secret.
It's very Greek.
I think it is, isn't it? Tomatoes and
Greek people,
if you can find them,
when they stop working, they die.
Yeah,
that's true.
just not Greek people, Cristo. We see it all the time. I see people retire, men in particular, because women carry on working, of course, because they carry on doing the housework and everything else. Men retire and are looking forward to their long retirement and, sadly, die.
Well, you have to have a mission in life. We looked at this beforehand, and I know they're trying to encourage the over 50s to work again. And if you don't have a mission in life, and AI, I talk about robotics and how that's going to replace virtually every job ever, we're going to miss a mission in life. And as a result, you'll probably find mortality rate will go, mortality rate will go up and life expectancy will go down. You need to have a central purpose.
I plan on dying on air. I will just keep
going. Now? That doesn't increase the ratings. Is that right?
Well, I tell you now...
There is a doctor in the house, but...
Well, just okay, but...
and a lawyer. We'll handle the greedy relatives.
You can let me go. You can let me go at 8:30 because then it's over halfway and I get the fee.
Oh, is that right? Is that what happens?
So yeah, try and resuscitate
Is that in your
me.
contract?
Yeah, yeah.
Halfway?
Halfway through, I get the fee. So
can we stop the halfway to the taking your clothes off?
You can stop the CPR at 8:31. Okay, just so you know. All right, when we come back, we'll do a few different
papers. I've heard of those.
from the newspapers as well, because there's been one that's dominating this morning. And then after 8 o'clock, we are going to return to the actual story in question. It's not just about Lineker, it's the migrant story. We'll talk to Mike Buckley about that. And don't forget as well, in under an hour's time, Isabel Oakeshott will be here to tell us why she's stepping back from discussing those lockdown files, arguably the biggest story of the year. So lots between now and 10 o'clock, all here live from the Talk Radio studio. This is Talk TV.